Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall. Humpty Dumpty had a great fall. You know the rest, but what if we told you that this nursery rhyme, recited by millions of children around the world, may not have been written for children at all, that behind these simple lines lies a 4,000-year-old mystery involving forgotten kings, shattered empires, medieval warfare, and coded political messages? Far from a harmless tale of a clumsy egg, Humpty Dumpty has roots that stretch deep into human history, across continents and centuries, long before it ever appeared in a child's book. Its meaning has shifted, adapted, and been reimagined countless times. And strangely, the original rhyme never even mentions an egg. Today, we would explore the strange and fascinating story of Humpty Dumpty, where it came from, how it changed, and why it endures. From the battle-scarred walls of medieval England to the pages of Victorian literature, we'll follow the trail of one of the world's most famous and most misunderstood characters. Because once you start to pull at the thread of this rhyme, the entire fabric of its history begins to unravel. And it all begins, not with an egg, but with something far older. Long before the rhyme as we know it appeared in print, many societies around the world were already using riddles as a form of storytelling. Ancient civilizations, from Mesopotamia to Greece, delighted in wordplay, using riddles to challenge the mind and pass on cultural wisdom. In these traditions, strange characters and seemingly nonsensical verses often carried hidden meanings, moral lessons, or clever twists. One of the earliest recorded riddles in history appears on a clay tablet from Sumer, dated to around 2000 BCE, over 4,000 years ago. It reads, "There is a house. One enters it blind and comes out seeing. What is it?" The answer, a school. This ancient riddle is deceptively simple, much like Humpty Dumpty. Though no direct line connects this Sumerian text to Humpty Dumpty, it shows us something essential. Humans have always played with language to obscure and reveal truth, and this tradition would shape the evolution of rhymes like Humpty Dumpty over the centuries. By the Middle Ages, England had developed a rich oral storytelling culture, heavily influenced by Anglo-Saxon and Norman traditions. Songs, ballads, and rhymes were recited in marketplaces, taverns, and courts. They served many purposes: entertainment, memory aids, protest, and even coded political commentary. In this environment, it was common to disguise sensitive messages in verse. Political criticism, for example, might be hidden in a seemingly childish rhyme. This tactic was useful in a time when open dissent against royalty or government could lead to imprisonment, or worse. Scholars believe Humpty Dumpty may have begun in this context, though we have no definitive record of its earliest use. The rhyme may have floated through the oral tradition for decades, or even centuries, before being committed to paper. The first known version of Humpty Dumpty in print appeared in the late 17th century, in a collection titled Merry Songs and Ballads, prior to the year 1800. Published around 1678, this early version of the rhyme is strikingly similar to the one we know today. Humpty Dumpty sate on a wall. Humpty Dumpty had a great fall. 70 men and 70 more cannot place Humpty Dumpty as he was before. Still, no egg. It's important to note that in this version, Humpty Dumpty appears to be a person or object that has fallen and broken beyond repair. The phrase 70 men and 70 more, a poetic way of saying 120 men, suggests an event of significant consequence. But who or what was Humpty Dumpty? That is the question that launched centuries of speculation. Over the years, several theories have been proposed about the true identity of Humpty Dumpty. Some are more plausible than others, but all point to a deeper context. One of the most popular historical theories comes from the English Civil War, specifically the Siege of Colchester in 1648. According to local legend, royalist forces mounted a massive cannon, nicknamed Humpty Dumpty, on the walls of Colchester. The cannon was manned by one One-Eyed Jack Thompson, a loyalist gunner. During the siege, parliamentary forces attacked the walls beneath the cannon. The structure collapsed, sending Humpty Dumpty tumbling to the ground. Due to its size and weight, the cannon could not be lifted back into place, and the royalists eventually lost the town. While there is no direct evidence from the period that a cannon named Humpty Dumpty existed, the tale fits the rhyme in striking ways. A large object on a wall, a fall, and many men unable to restore it. The timeline is also compelling. This siege occurred just a few decades before the rhyme appeared in print. Some historians remain skeptical, noting the lack of contemporary sources. But even if the story isn't literally true, it demonstrates how the rhyme could have emerged from, or been applied to, real historical events. Another theory posits that Humpty Dumpty was a nickname for King Richard III, who died at the Battle of Bosworth in 1585. Richard, who was portrayed as hunchbacked and deformed in Tudor propaganda, was known for his fall from power, both literal and symbolic. According to this view, the Great Fall refers to Richard's defeat and death in battle. All the king's horses and all the king's men could not restore him to the throne. While the rhyme itself does not explicitly name Richard, some interpret the imagery as a veiled reference to his dramatic downfall. This theory draws strength from the long-standing tradition of using rhyme and song to comment on royal affairs in coded form, a necessary precaution in the politically dangerous climate of post-Tudor England. Some scholars argue that Humpty Dumpty was never meant to reference a specific person or event at all. Instead, it may have begun as a metaphor, a riddle or parable about the human condition. Something or someone falls and cannot be put back together. In this interpretation, Humpty Dumpty becomes a stand-in for pride, power, or vulnerability. The imagery of a fall, followed by a failure to recover, is universally relatable. This reading would also explain the rhyme's longevity and adaptability across different cultures and generations. Surprisingly, the idea that Humpty Dumpty was an egg did not appear until the 19th century, more than 100 years after the rhyme's first printed appearance. The association with an egg seems to have solidified in Lewis Carroll's Through the Looking Glass, published in 1871. In this sequel to Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, Carroll introduces Humpty Dumpty as an egg-shaped character who sits on a wall and speaks in riddles. In the story, Alice encounters him and is puzzled by his strange logic and confidence. Carroll's illustration, drawn by Sir John Tenniel, depicts Humpty as a rotund anthropomorphic egg, complete with arms, legs, and an elaborate face. This image proved so powerful and memorable that it retroactively shaped public perception of the character. From that point on, Humpty Dumpty was, in the minds of most people, an egg. The transformation from abstract symbol to literal figure was complete. But Carroll never claimed to invent Humpty Dumpty. He was drawing on an existing rhyme and adding his own surreal twist. In doing so, however, he fundamentally changed how the world saw the character. So why do the origins of Humpty Dumpty matter? Because they reveal how language, politics, and culture shape even the simplest stories. The rhyme has been used as a metaphor for fallen kings, crumbled cities, and irreparable mistakes. It has been reinterpreted, repurposed, and reimagined across generations, often reflecting the anxieties and values of the times. Its endurance is not an accident. The rhyme is short, rhythmic, and easy to remember, but its simplicity masks a complex history of hidden meanings and evolving symbolism. The mystery of Humpty Dumpty is not just about who or what he was. It's about how stories change, how meanings shift, and how a four-line verse can carry echoes of war, revolution, and human fragility across the centuries. But what happened next? How did this curious rhyme make the leap from obscure riddle to international icon? And why did we all agree, somehow, that he was an egg? By the early 19th century, Humpty Dumpty was no longer just a cryptic rhyme. It was an enduring fragment of folklore recited in nurseries and passed down through generations. But it was in this very century that something remarkable happened. The character underwent a transformation so complete that it effectively changed the meaning of the rhyme itself. The central conflict of Humpty Dumpty's history is not a battle of swords or kings. It is a battle of interpretation. It is the struggle over what Humpty represents, how he should be portrayed, and what, if anything, the rhyme is really trying to tell us. During the 18th and early 19th centuries, a dramatic cultural shift took place across Europe and North America, the rise of formal childhood education and the invention of childhood as a distinct phase of life. With it came a growing industry of children's books, moral stories, and nursery rhyme collections. Writers and publishers began to compile rhymes that had once circulated informally. One of the most influential collections was Mother Goose's Melody, first published in London around 1765. Though Humpty Dumpty did not appear in that original edition, later versions in the 19th century included it, firmly positioning it among the ranks of children's verse. But in rebranding these rhymes for young readers, publishers often stripped away historical or political references. What may once have been veiled satire or allegory was now cleaned, softened, and made whimsical. The raw edges of folklore were smoothed over. Humpty Dumpty was no longer a metaphor for civil war or royal collapse. He was simply broken. This editorial sanitization created fertile ground for reinterpretation, and into that vacuum stepped one of the most imaginative authors of the Victorian era. In 1871, Through the Looking-Glass and What Alice Found, there introduced a version of Humpty Dumpty that would become definitive. Lewis Carroll, the pen name of Oxford mathematician Charles Lutwidge Dodgson, brought the character to life not just through words, but through vivid imagery, philosophical dialogue, and playful absurdity. In Carroll's surreal world, Humpty Dumpty is an egg-shaped gentleman sitting on a narrow wall, dressed in fine clothes and spouting cryptic logic. Alice finds him arrogant but intriguing. Their conversation meanders through puns and wordplay, including the famous exchange in which Humpty insists that words mean whatever I choose them to mean. This moment is not just humorous. It encapsulates the Victorian fascination with language, logic, and identity. Humpty Dumpty becomes a paradox, a character whose shell-like fragility hides intellectual bravado. He's a contradiction, designed to puzzle and provoke. Illustrator John Tenniel's depiction, a large dapper egg with human limbs, sealed the transformation. From this point on, Humpty Dumpty was no longer an ambiguous figure. He was, in the minds of readers everywhere, definitively an egg. The strange thing? Carroll never claimed to invent this version. In fact, there is no documented version of Humpty Dumpty being described as an egg prior to Tenniel's illustration. It was a creative leap, a surrealist's reinterpretation that was so successful, it eclipsed all earlier meanings. This was the moment of escalation in Humpty's evolution. What had once been a metaphor or mystery was now solidified into a character. The egg identity was canonized not by the original rhyme, but by a single illustrator's pen, and a novelist's delight in nonsense. As the British Empire expanded in the 19th and early 20th centuries, so too did British literature, education, and cultural exports. English-language nursery rhymes traveled far beyond the British Isles, carried in school books, anthologies, and primers. By the early 1900s, Humpty Dumpty was a fixture in classrooms across Canada, Australia, India, South Africa, and the United States. The egg-shaped version, complete with illustrations, had become the standard. In the United States, publishers like Rand McNally and McLaughlin Brothers began printing illustrated children's books featuring Humpty Dumpty as an egg-headed character, often anthropomorphized to suit the aesthetic of the day. The figure became not just a literary character, but a visual symbol, appearing in everything from porcelain figurines to advertising campaigns. The rhyme's simplicity, combined with the memorable egg imagery, made it a favorite for early childhood educators and illustrators. By the 1930s, Humpty Dumpty was so culturally embedded that his appearance in egg form was rarely questioned. But this widespread adoption created a strange historical irony. The reinterpretation became more popular and recognizable than the original. The real Humpty Dumpty, whoever or whatever he once was now buried beneath a new cultural identity. In the 20th century, scholars, psychologists, and literary critics began revisiting traditional nursery rhymes, not just as children's entertainment, but as cultural artifacts loaded with symbolism. Freudians interpreted Humpty Dumpty's fall as an allegory of trauma and disintegration of the self. Some educators speculated that the rhyme expressed fears of failure, punishment, or irreparable damage, fears that children could relate to, even if they didn't consciously understand them. At the same time, political theorists saw Humpty Dumpty as a symbol of broken systems, fallen regimes, unstable governments, or failed ideologies. During the Cold War, satirists portrayed Humpty Dumpty as a metaphor for the fragility of political power, a reminder that even seemingly solid institutions could shatter beyond repair. George Orwell famously referenced Humpty Dumpty in 1984, where he criticized the manipulation of language by authoritarian regimes. In Orwell's hands, Humpty's insistence that words mean whatever I say they mean became a chilling example of political doublespeak. This interpretation gave the rhyme new weight in a modern context. What had begun as a playful verse was now cited in discussions of propaganda, psychology, and ideology. By the mid-20th century, Humpty Dumpty had transcended literature entirely. He was a pop culture icon, appearing in television, film, music, and advertising. In 1948, he was the title character in an animated short produced by the United Productions of America, UPA, portraying him as a jolly egg with a top hat. In later decades, he appeared in everything from Sesame Street to Shrek, where he was reimagined with humor, cynicism, or even villainy. In each version, new layers of meaning were added, and often new contradictions. Sometimes he was noble and tragic, sometimes foolish, sometimes wise. The original rhyme offered almost no details, allowing creators to project anything they wanted onto him. The Humpty verse had become a canvas. Yet this continual reinvention only deepened the mystery. The more recognizable he became, the further we moved from the unknown origin. Who was Humpty Dumpty, really? Why did he fall, and why could no one fix him? In effect, the main conflict of Humpty Dumpty's modern history is the tension between clarity and confusion, between the simplicity of a four-line verse and the complexity of 4 centuries of reinterpretation. As the character moved further into pop culture, some historians and folklorists returned to the source materials. They began to re-examine the earliest printed versions of the rhyme, comparing regional variations and looking for clues. Some pointed out that earlier versions included lines now forgotten, such as additional verses or alternate endings, which suggest that the rhyme may have once been part of a longer ballad. Others noted how the structure of the poem mirrored that of traditional riddles, where the answer is implied but never stated. A minority of researchers even suggest that the rhyme's entire phrasing is intentionally misleading, a linguistic trap that hides its true meaning beneath apparent nonsense. If true, then the very act of interpreting Humpty Dumpty becomes an unsolvable puzzle, one that resists all tidy answers. This idea, that Humpty Dumpty is unknowable by design, has gained some popularity among literary theorists. It transforms the rhyme from a riddle with a missing answer into a commentary on the nature of ambiguity itself. Which brings us to a deeper question. What does Humpty Dumpty really mean? Why has this short, cryptic verse endured for so long, across cultures, languages, and ideologies? And why does it still resonate, even when we can no longer agree on what it was originally about? To answer that, we need to look not at the history of Humpty Dumpty, but at his symbolism, and how generations of people have used him to reflect their own hopes, fears, and fractured worlds. By now, Humpty Dumpty has journeyed far from the wall he once sat upon. From a possibly coded riddle in 17th century England, he became a central figure in children's literature, a cultural icon, and a symbolic mirror for the human experience. But his greatest transformation may not lie in his image or origin. It lies in what he represents. Humpty Dumpty has endured because he means something different to every generation. His broken state, irreversible, mysterious, and unexplained, invites interpretation. He is, in a sense, a blank shell onto which culture projects its fears, failures, and philosophies. At the heart of Humpty Dumpty's symbolism is a single powerful image, the fall. A fall from height is universally understood as a metaphor for failure, collapse, or downfall. In mythology, we see this pattern repeated: Icarus falling from the sky, Lucifer cast down from heaven, empires crumbling under their own weight. The idea that one can fall and be unable to return resonates across cultures and time periods. Humpty's fall is terminal. All the king's horses and all the king's men couldn't put Humpty together again. That finality underscores a truth most people understand instinctively. Some things, once broken, cannot be made whole again. This gives the rhyme a philosophical weight. Humpty Dumpty becomes a symbol not only of physical fragility, but emotional, political, and existential vulnerability. He is every fragile system, every ego, every ideal, perched high until something shifts and the world cannot restore what is lost. In the 20th century, psychoanalytic thinkers began to examine nursery rhymes not merely as entertainment, but as early cultural texts that shape a child's worldview. Bruno Bettelheim, a renowned child psychologist and author of The Uses of Enchantment, argued that fairy tales and rhymes offer symbolic frameworks through which children understand fear, failure, and personal growth. Though he did not focus extensively on Humpty Dumpty, his framework helps explain why this rhyme, in particular, resonates across generations. To a child, Humpty Dumpty may symbolize a deep-seated fear, the fear of falling, of breaking, of not being fixable. There is no resolution to the story, no healing, no second chance. Unlike other nursery rhymes that end in joy or moral instruction, Humpty's tale ends in irreversible loss. Modern child psychologists have noted that this ending, though bleak, may serve a purpose. It introduces young minds to the concept of consequence and permanence in a way that is simple but emotionally real. In adult psychoanalytic circles, Humpty has been used to represent identity fragmentation, particularly in times of trauma or personal crisis. The Great Fall becomes a metaphor for mental breakdown, and the inability to be put together again echoes the experience of living with irreparable emotional wounds. Beyond the psychological, Humpty Dumpty has frequently been adopted as a political metaphor, particularly in times of upheaval. In the aftermath of World War I, British newspapers often used Humpty Dumpty to symbolize fallen monarchies and shattered treaties. Editorial cartoons from the 1910s and 1920s depicted toppled leaders and broken political alliances as egg-shaped figures lying in ruins. One such cartoon from Punch magazine, dated 1920, shows the League of Nations as Humpty Dumpty, cracked and crumbling, with diplomats unable to restore peace in the wake of global war. The rhyme's cadence was often adapted into biting political commentary. Humpty Dumpty sat on the peace. Humpty Dumpty's hope did cease. During the Cold War, both American and Soviet commentators invoked the character as a metaphor for ideological fragility. In the United States, conservative commentators likened the crumbling Soviet system to Humpty Dumpty, incapable of being repaired. Meanwhile, Soviet-era satire sometimes used Humpty imagery to critique capitalism, a bloated system perched perilously high, bound to collapse. In South Africa during the apartheid era, protest literature included parodies of Humpty Dumpty to criticize the white minority government. The rhyme's simplicity made it easy to adapt, and its core message, that certain systems are beyond repair, made it a powerful tool of protest. Time and again, Humpty's broken body became a stand-in for broken promises, institutions, and regimes. Literary authors have long gravitated to Humpty Dumpty not just for his familiarity, but for the philosophical questions he provokes. In Through the Looking-Glass, Humpty tells Alice, "When I use a word, it means just what I choose it to mean, neither more nor less." This single line has inspired extensive philosophical debate about language, meaning, and interpretation. Linguist and philosopher Noam Chomsky referenced Humpty Dumpty in discussions about the arbitrariness of signifiers in language. Similarly, semioticians have cited Humpty as an example of unstable meaning, a character whose identity is transformed completely by cultural context. The concept of Humpty Dumpty logic even entered legal and academic discourse. In law, it refers to the misuse of words or reinterpretation of terms to suit a biased agenda, twisting language to serve power rather than truth. This is particularly relevant in constitutional law, where the definition of words can have vast implications. T.S. Eliot, James Joyce, and Salman Rushdie are among many authors who have made reference to Humpty Dumpty, not just as a character, but as a symbol of disorder, collapse, or the challenge of rebuilding shattered meaning. Though Humpty Dumpty is uniquely English in origin, similar motifs appear in other cultures, tales of fragile characters who fall or break, often with no redemption. In Japanese folklore, there is the concept of kintsugi, the art of repairing broken pottery with gold, embracing flaws and history rather than hiding them. The idea stands in stark contrast to Humpty Dumpty, who is never repaired. Still, both reflect cultural approaches to damage and restoration. In German traditions, the figure of Hanswurst, a foolish everyman, often meets misfortune through pride or clumsiness. Like Humpty, Hanswurst's fate is frequently played for laughs, but the lesson is about vulnerability and the cost of arrogance. In Russian fables, the character Kolobok, a round bread roll who escapes various predators, eventually falls victim to cunning. Though not cracked or broken like Humpty, Kolobok's story similarly involves a character whose shape and simplicity belie a tragic ending. These comparisons remind us that the themes embodied by Humpty Dumpty, pride, fragility, fall, and loss, are not limited to English-speaking cultures. They are part of a broader human narrative. Humpty Dumpty's symbolism continues to appear in contemporary culture, not always in children's stories, but often in subtle or recontextualized forms. In film, television, and music, characters who fall from grace are often described as having a Humpty Dumpty moment. In politics, the phrase is used to describe crises after which restoration is impossible, as in the breakup of the Soviet Union or the aftermath of the 1930 stock market crash. Musicians from Tom Waits to Elton John have invoked Humpty Dumpty in lyrics about emotional collapse or romantic disillusionment. In Twin Peaks, director David Lynch included cryptic references to Humpty Dumpty as a symbol of fractured identity. Even in science and technology, Humpty's name has surfaced. In cybersecurity, the Humpty Dumpty problem refers to systems that, once breached, cannot be fully restored to their previous integrity. The term has been used in disaster recovery planning, digital forensics, and software patch management. This wide-ranging usage underscores Humpty Dumpty's remarkable adaptability. He is not merely a relic of folklore. He is an enduring metaphor, one that continues to evolve with the times. So what makes Humpty Dumpty so effective, so embedded in the global imagination? It may be his very simplicity. The rhyme is short, only 4 lines. The character has no backstory, no motive, no resolution. And yet, in this brevity lies room for endless interpretation: the fall, the failure to repair, the mystery of what came before. Humpty Dumpty invites us to look inward, at our own assumptions, our own institutions, and the stories we inherit without question. His brokenness is haunting, not because of what it says explicitly, but because of what it refuses to explain, and perhaps that is why he has lasted, because we are still trying to make sense of him. For more than 4 centuries, Humpty Dumpty has endured. in books and battlefields, in classrooms and courtrooms, in satire and sorrow. He is more than a rhyme. He is a cultural mirror, a symbol of fragility, a riddle that still has no answer.